What's the biggest bullet you've ever dodged? Physically? A bus. I grew up in Bermuda, and since it is such a small island, cars are limited to one per family, and everyone drives mopeds. I was driving into town, and came up to a red light behind a bus. As is tradition, I scooted around the bus, to be in the front of the line of traffic. Literally 2 seconds later, a second bus smashed into the back of the first bus at like 30 miles per hour. I would have been pancaked. Without question, 100% dead. I just sat on the side of the road for a bit and thought about my mortality. I was out kayaking on a lake and several bullets whizzed by me. There was a distinct crack bus sound as it went by. I think some people were just out plinking in their backyard, adjacent to the lake, and didn't think a backstop was necessary. This also happened to me a few weeks later, when I was paddling on a small stream. Bullets whizzed by above the bank, just over my head. I don't think anyone knew I was there either time. Regardless, when you go out and shoot stuff, make sure there's a backstop, FFS. Also, I don't know how big the bullets were, so I'm unsure which was the biggest bullet dodged. As a dead guy, I would be so pissed off to learn my life ended because I was floating in a goddamn boat at the wrong second. My first ever boyfriend dated me when I was 14 and he was 16. We only dated for 1 week before he took me into the woods and forced me to kiss him. I started to feel icky and broke it off that same day. 5 years later I found out that he was now in prison for raping 2 14-year-old girls. When I was 16 I had a crush on this dude who was 17 or 18. And he was trying to convince me to hook up him in the middle of the night cause he lived like 2 neighborhoods down from me. I was down till he mentioned that he wanted to do it in the woods, and I was like no thanks, and never really talked to him again. I found out he wasn't alone that night, he had zero plans of meeting me alone, and the friend he was with had a reputation for being a rapist. We didn't use the word rapist to refer to him. We called him creepy, but now that I'm older I realize he was 100% a rapist. I broke my lease and moved out of a terrible apartment complex I was living in to move back home because I was broke. 2 weeks later the whole complex burned to the ground from a meth lab in another unit. A few edits for some commonly asked questions. The apartment was right outside of downtown Birmingham, Alabama. I didn't have renter's insurance, broke 20Y/0 at the time, so wouldn't have got any kickback from that. I did end up getting my security deposit back, which they said I had forfeit by breaking the lease, so that was nice. That meth lab wasn't mine. I packed mine up and brought it back to Florida with me where it belonged. 2005, my friend and I evacuated New Orleans 2 days before Hurricane Katrina and drove to Mississippi with the little money we had. We were trying to decide on where to stay for the night, and it was between a mid-range hotel or the really cheap motel. Decided to spend a little more for the hotel. During the night the eye of the storm came through Mississippi and flattened the roof of the motel we decided against. My mom wasn't going to leave for Katrina. I told her I was going to take me and my little sister and hitchhike if she didn't pack the car and leave within the hour. My dad didn't leave, and he ended up on the roof with our neighbor because our house got flooded. No way all of us would have survived. Katrina decimated my town. Everything 2 miles inland or less was destroyed. This was my first ever experience dealing with a hurricane since I'm from the Midwest and was in New Orleans for college. Hope you and your family are all safe and doing well now. My ex-girlfriend moved out of my house a day before the first lockdown in Spain. She previously pulled a knife on me. Dude, thank God. Finishing up my paper route when I was a kid. Walking home on the sidewalk next to a busy road with sister on the inside, me dragging our little buggy on the outside. Middle of winter, car jumps the curb and takes out our buggy. Neither of us know what the hell had just happened other than the ungodly scraping sound, and that our buggy was gone. Find out later that the driver saw us run home scared and brought back our buggy, which was utterly destroyed in a crumpled heap. I was pulling the cart and my hand was on it, so I'm not sure how I avoided eating chrome that day. Not a single scratch on me. I still think about it regularly, and it's been over 30 years. Kind of similar. 2000ish friend, and I got some root beers from a store, and we're walking home. Car jumped the curb, shot across the grass, and past the sidewalk, and came within inches of hitting me. When the car got back onto the next street over, an old man got out of the car and appeared to be having issues with his legs. Friend and I just continued on our way back to his house, where we told his dad, who said something to the effect of, "I'm going to have to teach you boys how to cross a street safely." I didn't think too much of it until later in life, when I realized A, I didn't do anything wrong. I was 15 feet from the street on the sidewalk, and B, I could have died / seriously injured if the driver was a few more inches to the right. I matched with a guy on Tinder who played for the Atlanta Falcons. He was really charming and seemed nice. He asked me to fly down to Atlantic City for Memorial Day weekend, said he would pay for everything, airfare, hotel, food, etc. But I had never met him before, and he refused to give me his phone number. I was uncomfortable flying to meet a stranger, so I told him no. 2 weeks later he was on the news for kicking and killing his girlfriend's dog. I had 2 job offers in different states at the same time. The one I didn't take was offering more money, but I just didn't gel with the guy who would be my boss, and really liked the guy who would be my boss at the lower offer. The better offer was in a state I had always wanted to live in, for a company I admired, but something felt off, so I went with the lower offer. I ended up meeting my wife in the city of the lower offer. Meanwhile, the company that had given me the higher offer abruptly closed and laid off their entire staff with no severance, so if I had taken that, I would have been stuck on the other side of the country with no job and no money. Not the biggest bullet I've ever dodged, but I had to walk away from the interview process from one of my dream companies because I had been out of work for a year, and I had another offer from a smaller, less prestigious company and couldn't hold out with no income any longer. I tried asking the dream company if we could speed up the process due to the competing offer, but they could not. The dream company was in entertainment and laid off a ton of people when the pandemic hit. The job I took was doing the same role, but in real estate, which boomed during the pandemic. Also, my ex ended up getting a job at the dream company, kind of nice to not have to work next to her. That time I didn't go along for the ride when a friend of mine was running weed, years ago, back when it was more illegal. I was bored and unemployed at the time, and passed on this trip because I had to go to a job interview to be a zombie for Halloween festivities at an amusement park. I got the job, my friend got arrested, and did 30 days in jail. That sounds like an awesome job. I got on an intercity bus and almost sat in the middle, but moved and sat at the back. The bus later collided with a truck and got opened up like a tin can. If I had sat where I originally intended, I would have been killed. I was late to my bus, and instead of running to catch it, I decided to miss it, and it was later hit by a speeding truck. Caught the one behind it and later saw the aftermath. 2 people died. It does raise the question, if you did run down the bus, would the 30 seconds of it stopping to pick you up have avoided the crash? Had a friend who asked if I wanted to move to CA with him and his family. I was 16 and thought it sounded fun. I didn't know at the time, but he was actually rescuing me from my insane mother and a not so happy home life. When you are abused, sometimes it is hard to know you are abused until you become an adult and gain a perspective. I shudder to think what would have happened to me if I had stayed there. That's interesting. Can you elaborate on the situation, if you don't mind? Like, were you close with them that they'd be okay to live with them in their same house? And if so, are you still close with them? If you don't mind. I only knew him for a year, but we became best friends. It was a weird situation. I only met the parents once before I moved out there with them. I was initially supposed to stay just for the summer, but I was told that I could stay longer if I wanted. I think this gave us both an out if things didn't work out. I ended up finishing my last year of high school living with them and stayed until I was 21. The father has since passed, but I'm still in touch with my friend. I didn't really find out that they were rescuing me until way later, when the mother told me that my friend told her about my home life to convince her to let me move in. I had no idea at the time. Lol. Not me. A Dutch mate of mine living in Tasmania had to visit his sick mum in Amsterdam. Booking his flight online, he said to his wife, "You know, I'm sick of flying Malaysian Airlines. The food is shit, the hostess are miserable. It'll cost more, but I'm booking with Singapore." So, instead of dying on MH17, he was on a plane 40 kilometers ahead of it. Edit, just to clarify, he was on way home from AMS. My uncle booked one flight earlier than MH17 with Malaysian Airlines, because then he could be at work earlier. Shit's crazy. A few months ago I was driving on I-80 at night when out of nowhere the biggest buck I'd ever seen is in the middle of my lane. I did exactly what you're not supposed to do and swerved, and thankfully managed to keep the rear of the car content with it. I literally shaved that buck's ass. My mirror was folded in. I know you're not supposed to swerve, but I drive a tiny little thing, and that buck's body would have gone through my windshield into my and my wife's face at 70 miles per hour. I was supposed to hang out with a couple of friends one night. We were going to go to a party that we were all invited to the weekend before. I asked to get off work early so I could go to the party. My manager let me go early, so I went to go find my friends. But I had a really bad feeling all day and it just kept getting worse. Instead of turning left to go to my friend's house, I went right and went home. I found out a few weeks later that they got busted with cocaine in their car. They were 16 and 17 at the time. I was 18, so I would have been screwed. When I was 19, all of my friends decided to take a last-minute trip to Canada. I was at work, and, even though we were dead, my boss refused to let me leave early, so I could go. I was super pissed, and was texting my friend pretty consistently until she just stopped answering. I didn't hear from for a couple of days, and then she called me to tell me what happened in Canada. Someone forgot they had mace in their purse, and upon Canadian authorities searching their bags, found said mace. They were all detained and strip searched. The girl's father had to pay a $500 fine before they could be released. To this day, I have never been happier to have had such a bitch of a boss. I was at the Tacoma Mall when the Tacoma Mall shooting happened, walking right towards where the gunman opened fire when my then fiancé decided to go back into a store we were just in. No shit. The time it took us to get back to the store was the same amount of time it would taken to be right where it all broke out, 10 seconds one direction or 10 seconds in the other. Hearing the screams and gunshots echoing in the mall was crazy. They locked us in the Suncoast video store for a while before having us exit out the back. Edit, I'll add a bit more detail if you're interested. I had run into a person I worked with at the time about 10 minutes before the shooting. I think he went back to Masses, and we went to the Suncoast. We were Christmas shopping, the mall was pretty busy. It came down to my fiancée remembering she wanted to get someone a series of Friends DVDs, so we headed back. Just as we were a few feet from the store, the first cluster of shots rang off, and there was this shared confusion as to WTF was happening. My first thought was gang violence or something. It's Tacoma after all, because it sounded like several people firing at once. Echoes. If something like this happened today I'd think potential mass shooter right away, but then it wasn't so much a thing. We had to yell at several women who were still looking around outside the store, confused, telling them to shelter inside, waving them in. My memory might be off, but it felt like maybe 20 to 30 of us crammed in the Suncoast, them having put the metal gate down and locking it. So we are all in there, just listening to the gunshots and screaming, wondering what was happening. As time went on and the shooting continued, it seemed less likely to be some gang thing as they'd get the F out, so I and others started saying we need to exit the store. He cold shot through the metal gate, us fish in a barrel. I was spared from seeing anyone who was shot. The coworker I had seen just prior was not so lucky, as he was around several who got hit. It understandably really affected him. He was this tough truck driver dude who doesn't take shit from anyone. When I saw him, and we talked about it, he started crying. Crazy how much pain one person is capable of inflicting. I think about this day a lot. Being spiritual and not religious, I feel like God spared us that day. I'm sorry to hear about others who were adversely impacted by that day. A year ago, almost to the day, I was offered a new job. It was exactly what I was looking for, and was really excited. They told me they would email the contract, but after a week I hadn't had anything. After a lot of chasing they told me they'd changed the structure of the organization, so the position wasn't available. I have a month's notice for my current job, and if I had taken the job my notice period would have been after the cut-off date for furlough in the UK. The new job was in an industry that collapsed through the pandemic and the industry I work in has boomed. If I had received that email I would have probably been close to bankruptcy now. Once at a bar a woman was surprisingly into me as we danced. If I had had more confidence back then I definitely could taken her home. In the end, one of my karaoke buddies ended up with her instead and got caught by her husband that night. I knew a guy that got stabbed by the husband after he went home with a woman. Apparently she liked seeing the husband go crazy on the dudes she brought home. I swear there was a movie or show with something like this. The guy pays, tells this dude to sleep with his wife, and then beats the shit out of him afterwards. Edit, it was the drone pilot from Jack Ryan. Thanks/you/native. Such a weird scene. In 1996, my parents were deciding between two houses to move into. They picked the new construction that resulted in being placed on shoddy soil and years of lawsuits when we ultimately moved in 2001. Anyway, the other house they cold picked, presumably on better soil, would placed my older sister at Columbine High School as a freshman for the 1998 to 1999 school year. Reading this at first like this doesn't seem like a dodged blow. Like, literally, correct usage, dodged a bullet. Not me, but my friend. We were in a bar, and she was talking to a dude she met on Tinder. When she turned around I saw him put something into her beer. I walked up, pretended to stumble, and knocked it out of her hand, apologized, told her I'd buy her next beer, and when we walked over to the bar I told her what he did. We left right after, decided to grab a case of beer, and play Mario Kart that night instead. I only tagged along because she asked me to, which I'm always perfectly happy to do. Glad I did. Pro tip to people, if you aren't in a shitty establishment, tell the bartender. The rapist may get some repercussions, at least kicked out. If you're in a shitty establishment, just get foe. If the rapist is a regular, the staff may have their back, could get sketchy for you. I once met a girl at a bar a few years ago. She was hot, and she started a conversation with me. I don't remember about what. But at the end of it, I wanted to ask her out. But being extremely shy I couldn't. If she hadn't started to talk to me, I would just admired and avoided her, being a big and awkward guy. Anyway, I went to the bathroom to clear my head, and when I came back I saw my friend who I came with asked her out, a total dick move, because I told him I wanna ask her out, and I just stand there with an awkward smile waiting for them to leave, so I could drink my anger away. Couple of days after that, a mutual friend said that friend from the bar was robbed by a girl he had brought to his apartment. So still today I get mixed feelings when I see him. Edit. Thanks for taking the time and reading my story. I just wrote about an incident in my life, didn't think it would get any awards. Thank you. Not me but my dad. He traveled to London for work back from 2001-2007. He was booked for the day off on July 7th 2005, as that is my birthday, and the train he normally got to work was one of the ones that was bombed by terrorists. Edit. I wasn't born in 2005, just to clarify. It was just the date I had a birthday on that my dad wanted to spend with me. I was born July 7th 1997. I think that was the one where people would normally have taken the Piccadilly line changed because of a delay, so a lot of people died due to a fault on the Piccadilly line. The Pic was one of the lines that got bombed first carriage. The driver still works for London Underground, just not on the trains. I've seen him before when he's come to my depot for a day with an instructor to keep his license valid, even though he has no desire to ever drive in passenger service again. I almost fell for a pyramid scheme in high school. My friend brought me to one of their meetings, ACN, and I was so on board, but my parents talked me down. I was upset at them until I learned more about MLMs and quickly changed my mind. Sometimes I imagine where I'd be now if I went through with it. It wouldn't be pretty, that's for sure. Wow, I remember ACN. What a sham. Totally. That same friend would sometimes pitch it to waitresses/waiters, and one of them cut him off with "I'm not joining ACN Mayo." I think he's still doing it. Ike. He has an actual job for income thankfully, but it's one of those things where they're in too deep to be talked out of it. Was driving on a freeway in the right lane when there was a sudden traffic jam ahead. I slammed on my brakes and was about to swerve onto the shoulder when I noticed that I wasn't sure the semi behind me could stop, and I didn't know how long we actually had a shoulder. Construction was happening at the time. Made the decision to rear-end the car in front of me to stay off the shoulder. The truck went onto the shoulder, brakes squealing, and finally managed to stop when the back tires of their trailer were level with me. Good thing we weren't in a center lane, and that we happened to have a shoulder at that moment. As a bonus, I stopped in time and didn't hit the car in front of me after all, though I would have happily taken that hit and hopefully only would have shook up the people in front of me in place of literally being hit by a truck. You have some good split-second decision-making skills.